All right, Colette, whenever you're ready.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. So this is one of our educational events where we kind of go through what the Green Party values are, because the Green Party is an international movement, not just something that happens in the US. And these are the things that kind of connect us all. The first of the 10 key values is grassroots democracy. So that's what we're going to be focused on this evening. If you want to move to the next slide, Cuddy. So defining democracy. So grassroots means from the ground bottom up. So kind of thinking about how a field of grass grows. It's got a root system. If the roots are bad, you're not going to have grass. Democracy, system of governing of and by the whole of a population of people. And grassroots democracy is just kind of combining those two things. So far, does anyone have any questions? All right, let's move on. So what is not grassroots democracy? So top-down decision-making, which or organizing versus mobilizing, centralized hierarchical power structures that are unaccountable to the people, lack of choice in which candidates and parties we can vote for to represent us, voter suppression and denial of suffrage, lack of transparency, consistency in voting, and election methods. So a lot of the things that we see now in our so-called democracy is not grassroots democracy. So what we're looking at doing is organizing the people and creating a system that works for all of us, not top-down authoritative government. Go ahead and get in the next slide. So here we go. How is grassroots democracy different? So it's community decision-making, which is localized as much as possible. So one of the things that we really focus on is how our community is different than other communities, because each community, while they may have similar structures, they all have different needs. And so we focus on what that community actually needs, and it's all our communities, it's localized. All decisions that cannot be made locally are made in a democratic confederation with other municipalities and democratically elected workers' councils. So again, if we can't do anything locally, just as a group, we try to have a group of people that we decide to go in and work for us. And this isn't like saying, go be our representative and do whatever you want and work for lobbyists. You still elected representatives are able to be recalled and replaced by the people at any time. Should they fail to represent their community's interests, citizens can easily propose and pass popular ballot initiatives. So again, that's different than the kind of democracy that we've seen in this country, where once we send someone off to represent us, they stop doing that. And you can't just recall them. It's a whole process that you have to go through. And usually there's no money that we can use to campaign for someone to take their place. All candidates and parties who file to run for office are supplied with equal time and resources to campaign and are automatically included on the ballot and in debates. It's another thing that the Green Party has really had a hard time with, because it's easy to run as a Democrat or a Republican. They are established corporate parties that get all of the media attention. So they get the commercials, they get the interviews, they get the debates. Meanwhile, third parties are forced to go out and get thousands of signatures just to get on the ballot line. And then we're sued to be kicked off the ballot line by these bigger parties. So grassroots democracy is like, no, everybody is equal. It doesn't matter which party you're in. You get to be on the ballot, you get to run, you get to talk about what you're running for. No corporate influence on elections and government. Again, corporations are not people. We want our government to represent us, not businesses, not corporate interests, and not billionaires. Transparent and accountable election and voting methods. So I think that that's something that unites all Americans. We want everything transparent, and we want to be able to trust the election process. So far, does anyone have any questions, or did anyone want to jump in? All right, we can go to the next slide. How undemocratic is our current system? We kind of touched on that on the earlier slides. So how does our current system work? The candidates run for office, usually within one of the two major corporate-owned political duopoly parties, Democrat or Republican. Republican candidates run outright campaigns focused on counting the ultra-wealthy, or courting the ultra-wealthy, sorry, the evangelicals and the neo-fascists. Democratic candidates speak as though they're on the side of Black, Indigenous, people of color communities and the working class during the campaign, then push for and institute policies that are disproportionately hurt the citizens they claim to care about when elected. And I feel like we've really seen that in the last election. Candidates from both major parties take large, unaccountable campaign contributions from wealthy corporate donors to push legislation or government action favorable to the wealthy and corporate interests instead of fighting for their constituents and communities. Again, if we get money out of politics, that would take care of that issue because they're here for us and to work for their community. They're not here to make money. That's what we're focused on trying to accomplish. Corrupt corporate candidates are elected because they raise the most money and enact legislation that inevitably serves short-term profits for the rich over the interests of the people, planet, and peace. The working class majority are left with no political home in either party, with many progressive-minded voters settling for the lesser evil. Democrats, rather than settling for the lesser evil Democrats, rather than dare to vote their values for fear of handing power to the extremist Republicans. Wash, rinse, repeat. We have to deal with the same thing over and over, and the process continues. What we're trying to do is stop that cycle and show people that they do have a choice and there is another way. All right, Cody, do you want to go through this slide?
Yeah, sure. So, we wanted to break down a little bit about where our elections are at in this part of our history in Arizona. So let's focus first on the good. The Arizona Permanent Early Voting List is a really good thing. It's unfortunately being attacked by specifically the fringe right wing that has found a home in Arizona. But, having that permanent early voting list and making it easier for people to vote is good. Same thing with the Arizona Clean Elections Act. It helps provide public campaign funding for people who want to run without taking, big corporate campaign contributions. So that's the good. The bad is that our ballot access and political party recognition laws are pretty draconian and arbitrary, and if you're not a Democrat or Republican or even a Libertarian at this point, it's tough to really break in there. So another thing that is not so great about our election systems here is that we do use first past the post like most elections in America. The unfortunate part of that is that it makes it really hard for third parties and independents to win elections. And, we also get thrown the spoiler effect as Greens a lot. And we're trying to break that. So it's something that is not great about our current elections that we're working on fixing. Another thing that's not so great is the no automatic voter registration at 18, which is a reform that we desperately need. As soon as you're eligible, you should be able to vote, no questions. And of course, that brings us over to the ugly, the increased attacks on voting rights by the AZ GOP since the 2020 election. Obviously, right now, we're in the midst of an audit of kinds, I guess, if you can call it that, which is, essentially just a display and delusion by the AZ GOP. It's very difficult to recall elected officials. Specifically, there was a initiative to recall Doug Ducey recently that gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures that we just, it just wasn't enough. And they were really got on the ball early. And so it really speaks to how hard it is to, recall somebody once they're elected and to pass, citizen organized ballot initiatives. So we'd like to make that whole process a lot easier. And of course, something that pervades all of our politics in the United States is that there is largely unaccountable dark money influencing state politics on both sides of the aisle. That our Democratic friends give a lot of heat to the Republicans for this sort of thing, but don't seem to take a lot of responsibility for it themselves. So we're saying that both sides taking these corporate contributions is detrimental to the democratic process in Arizona. And of course, there is an asterisk down at the bottom that says these lists are incomplete. Obviously, there's obviously some things that are good and a lot of stuff that is not so great about our democratic system here in Arizona that hopefully we can work to fix. Ballot access requirements in Arizona for candidates, and this is something we run into a lot as Greens. And I put this slide in here just to sort of explain the vast difference in what is asked of us as unaffiliated independents compared to the Democrats and the Republicans and Libertarians. So right now, the signatures required for an unaffiliated, quote unquote, because we are affiliated, we're just not recognized, independent candidate to appear on the ballot for U.S. Senate in 2020 in AZ was 39,039. And if you look, I put the comparison numbers for each of these. So like compared to the Democrats, that's 6,325, Republicans 6,663, Libertarians 3,335. So there's obviously an imbalance there, to say the least, right? Same thing, as you go down the ballot, for the U.S. House, for an unaffiliated independent candidate, it's 3,500 to 5,000, which is almost double what Dems and Republicans have to do. And then for AZ State House and Senate, you need 3% of total registered independent voters in your particular district. And for qualified parties, you do only need 0.5% of total qualified signers. So, we're not playing a fair game, which is sort of the point that we're trying to get across with these slides. Same thing with statewide party recognition requirements. The signatures that we need for statewide ballot access or new party recognition is at least 1.33% of the total votes cast for governor in the last election. So for 2022, the number that we have to reach for statewide ballot access is 31,686. And those have to be valid signatures, which means that they check and make sure that, all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted and everybody is from where they say they are and they're registered in the county they say they are. Signatures must also come from at least 5 different counties. So, we're a very population dense spot here in Maricopa County where I'm located, but we can't simply just get petition signatures from one county. We have to get at least 5 different counties. And at least 10% of the total number of signatures must come from counties with populations of less than 500,000. So they're really making us spread out to all the parts of Arizona here, which, that's fair, but it's also it's tough to do, especially when you're a small party. Continuing from that, if we achieve party recognition, the party must continue to file a new petition for statewide recognition, or our party's candidate for governor must receive at least 5% of the vote in a gubernatorial election. Unfortunately, we did not achieve that our last time around running a gubernatorial candidate, but here's hoping that we can reach that again in the future. And alternatively down here, 0.66% of all registered voters in the state, which, if my math is correct, is about 25,872 registered voters based on 2020 numbers. And they must have affiliated with the party by October 1st in the year preceding the general election. So there's a lot of, hurdles we have to go through to even be represented politically here in Arizona, which is not democracy. It's very much the opposite. Some other ways our electoral democracy is failing us: obviously voter suppression generally, partisan gerrymandering, strict voter ID laws, the purging of inactive voters and permanent early voter list voters. That's happening now, unfortunately. There's systemic barriers to voting, which is something that maybe we don't think about as much. Lack of access to childcare, inability to miss work to vote, inaccessible polling locations for those with disabilities. There's a lot that goes into the suppression of our votes that we maybe don't think about as much. And of course, closed debates, denial of suffrage to felons and undocumented individuals is a big one. Lack of media coverage and corporate biased media. I remember watching Howie Hawkins on Morning Joe this past election, and it was just, there was no even pretense of unbiased reporting there. So that's something we have to deal with. And, obviously the list goes on. So what's the result? Obviously, that means the ultra wealthy buy our government at every level they can through legalized bribery in the form of large corporate campaign contributions. Both parties, Republicans and Democrats, and of course their donors, actively work to keep unbought, independent voices out of the political conversation so voters have no viable alternatives on the ballot. And, this is not an accident. This is by design that the major parties have created a monopoly on democracy, which is, very unfortunately effective at keeping independent voices out of the political conversation. And of course, that means that working people in marginalized communities are alienated from the governing and decision-making process and, left politically homeless, like many of us were before finding the Green Party. So now we're going to talk a little bit about our view on democracy and how Greens and EcoSocialists propose that we fix our broken political and democratic systems. Colette, would you like to take back over for this part?
So this is an excerpt from our Green Party 10 key values. All human beings must be allowed a say in decisions that affect their lives. No one should be subject to the will of another. We work to improve public participation in every aspect of government and seek to ensure that our public representatives are fully accountable to the people who elect them. We also work to create new types of political organizations that expand the process of participatory democracy by directly including citizens in decision making. So these are a few of the electoral reforms that we support because it's more inclusive and it opens the door to true grassroots democracy. So proportional representation in multi-member congressional districts. The more people that we have representatives, the better. Ranked choice voting, and that's actually something that we have been actively working as a party to support. And a couple of people on this call are actually on the committee for ranked choice voting. So hopefully we'll see it in Arizona sooner rather than later. Full public financing of elections. Again, getting that corporate money out of politics and requiring everyone to use the same kind of resources just makes it more fair and more accessible to everyone. Open debates. This also helps other people find out who we are and what we're about, because the debate is where everybody hears why you're running, what's important to you, and why they need to vote for you versus somebody else. And unfortunately, with our closed debate system, there are only two parties that are represented, and there are way more than two parties. So there are so many different viewpoints and ideas that aren't even being brought up because it's not part of the conversation between the two corporate parties. Free and equal media time for qualified candidates. Again, we want to make sure that the message of all the different parties reach all the people. So instead of hearing the same 4 or 5 ads for the same person over and over, we want to hear different ads for different candidates and give them equal time so that they can give their message to the people, because that is true democracy. Prohibit corporate campaign and party contributions and end corporate personhood. Again, we've kind of touched on this a couple of times. Corporations are not people and they should not be treated as such. Our government was created to support people and not businesses. Eliminate unfair ballot access and party recognition laws. Like what Cody was talking about, all of the different laws that we have for party recognition is just more barriers to get our voices, our ideas, and our values out in the political sphere. And it hinders us from making the actual changes that need to be done. Because unfortunately, if there's only two different parties arguing back and forth all the time, you're not going to get the things that need to be done. Unfair ballot access, that's another thing that we've really been working on. Now that we have a new recorder in Pima County, I know that that's one of the things that she ran on, just trying to get it so that everyone has access to these ballots, making it easier for everyone to vote. Automatic voter registration. The fact that right now, if you turn 18, you have to be reminded to register to vote. I feel like it's not something that Americans are taught is really important. So once you turn 18, we're not getting people who are going out there to vote, and now there's another barrier for them. None of the above option on all ballots. So sometimes there are people running and you're like, I don't want to vote for any of them. We should have the option to be like, both of these candidates suck. Declaring Election Day a national holiday. This makes it easier for people to show up on Election Day at the polls. I know that Arizona has the permanent early voter registration list that I've been on, but people like going to the polls. It's an important part of our voting process, and having Election Day be a national holiday gives them the opportunity to participate in that way. Restoring voting rights to felons and extend suffrage to undocumented workers residing in the US. So voting rights for felons is actually something that I'm really passionate about. When I was gathering signatures for Howie Hawkins, a lot of the younger people I talked to, unfortunately, they're like, I'm a felon. Like, I got caught with drugs in high school and I fell into the wrong crowd and I've done some time in jail and now I can't vote. So that's a lot of the things that I was running into. And they're like, I don't know anybody else who is interested in voting, because if I can't vote, my friends don't want to vote. So it doesn't just affect adults who have spent the last 20 years of their life in prison. It affects young people who made small mistakes right as they were becoming adults, and now the rest of their adulthood is dampened by that mistake. Accountable elections with hand-counted and verified paper ballots. Again, it makes it easier for us to have transparent elections and decreases the amount of fraud that we can be seeing. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Democracy at work. As eco-socialists, we believe that democracy shouldn't stop at the ballot box, and that grassroots democratic process should be applied to our economic systems as well as our governing systems. We support the creation and subsidization of democratically operated, worker-owned cooperative businesses and the election of worker representatives to local industry-specific workers' councils and unions that collaborate with the elected local government to serve the best interest of working people in their communities. So we were talking about this a little bit earlier, how an organized workplace is a fair workplace, it's a happy workplace. It's where the workers not only work to keep their business running, but they're working to improve their lives, to having better pay, having better benefits, and making sure that the workers are taken care of. It benefits everybody. The only thing that it hurts is profits, because when you're in a worker corporation cooperation, you're not there to make somebody else a profit, and a lot of our business owners don't like that. The labor of the workers creates the profit surplus value, so the workers should get to decide democratically what to do with that profit surplus. This usually is the biggest hurdle that I find when I'm talking to capitalists about the Green Party values, because they believe that profit is not owned by the workers, when we believe just the opposite. We believe that workers add value and that they own that value, and they should decide what happens to that value. It's not owned by one or two people at the top. Well-organized, democratically operated enterprises that work for the best interests of their workers and their communities are a direct threat to the capitalist system, as it shows that there can be a viable economic and social alternative. The powers that be understand that when the people realize that there is power in number and there's power in organizing, that they are going to lose their profits. They're going to lose the third sailboat, they're going to lose that second home, and they're going to lose a couple zeros at the end of their bonus check. We don't care about that. We are here for the workers, and we want to make sure that the workers are represented not only at the ballot box, but we want to make sure that in every aspect of their lives, it's run in a democratic way that benefits everyone from the bottom to the top. Next slide. Democracy in our communities. We believe that the grassroots democratic process must be integrated into being a part of our daily lives in our local communities before we can hope to achieve it on a larger scale. Change starts at home. That's one thing that got me involved in the Green Party, is I wanted to have a clean slate when it came to getting involved in my community. I didn't want to join a big group like the Democratic Party, where there's a lot of history of oppression, there's history of racism. I wanted to be like, no, let's start over. Let's show the community what the Green Party is all about, how we can be different, and what that looks like here in their community. And the Green Party values that grassroots democracy, and they value grassroots organization. So I felt like I fit in pretty well here. We support the public ownership and democratic control of the utilities and industries necessary for a dignified life in the 21st century. So energy, water, housing, internet, education, etc. We believe that if the public owns these items, then they don't exist just to make a profit. We believe that they are basic human rights, and that you shouldn't have to pay for something that gives you life and gives you dignity. We support the defunding of the police and putting our police forces under democratic community control oversight as a transitional step towards a goal of police abolition. So we believe that, unfortunately, the police don't police equally. So if you go to a rich neighborhood, you're not going to see the kind of police enforcement and the police presence that you would if you were to go to a poorer neighborhood in the middle of the city. We understand that the way our police system is set up, it is designed to be a racist system, and we want to take funds away from that system, focus it on building up our communities so that we don't have the problems with crime because people aren't getting their needs met. We'll see the need for any kind of law enforcement to decrease so that we can eventually abolish the police entirely. We believe in expanding the public commons through investments in and protections of our current public resources and spaces, and the creation of new public commons projects like community gardens, tool libraries, bike shares, and more. That puts our name as the EcoSocialists, and that's the eco part of it. We understand that this environment is all we have. We don't have a plan B. We have to take care of the land that we're on, the space that we're on, respect those who owned it before us, and continue to take care of it so that we can live sustainable lives and stop raping this planet of its natural resources. Next slide. Cody, do you want to read this one?
Sure, I can take over. So, in short, the Green eco-socialist view on democracy is that we demand democracy in our communities. We demand democracy in our workplaces. We demand democracy in our governments. And we demand democracy for all. Basically, we want more democracy in all of our lives and not less. Some people think that's a radical viewpoint. Not so much here.
I'd say that we are radical, and that's okay.
I'd agree. All right, so what can we do? I know we talked a lot about, a lot of the stuff that's wrong with our democratic system, or undemocratic system, as I like to put it. But what can we do? How do we change that? How do we be part of the change we want to see? So the first thing you can do is you can break free from the corporate duopoly. The two major corporate-owned parties only remain in power because we continue to vote for them against our own best interests. And frankly, we are running out of time to stop the destruction of the planet through war and climate catastrophe that they're causing. Ultimately, the power belongs to us, the people, and we decide how we want to use it. We can continue to vote for our oppression by voting for the Republicans and the Democrats and hoping to see some change that never comes, or we could dare to build our own vehicle of independent political power that works for workers, families, communities, and our environment. So, our first plea, if you are over the age of 18 and eligible to vote in the state of Arizona, change your voter registration to green. Get involved with your county and state party in the Yes AZ caucus. We're here, we're doing stuff. Get involved. And just ultimately have the courage to be the change you want to see here in AZ. You know, it's not going to help if nobody shows up, you know. And that's the hardest part, is, at least in my organizing experience, is really just having the tenacity and the drive to say, okay, I want to see this change happen, and showing up and bringing more people and trying to make that movement happen one person at a time. So this is our plea to anyone out there who's on this call or viewing this seminar and is not sure if they can continue to support things the way they are. There is an alternative. You can break free from the corporate corruption and you can become a green. So the second thing you can do is get involved. One of the big things that we're trying to push and partner with in the Arizona Green Party is Voter Choice Arizona. They've been helping to lead the organizing effort for ranked choice voting here in Arizona. They hold monthly strategy meetings. I believe it's on a Wednesday, first Wednesday or last Wednesday. Can't remember off the top of my head, but their website is linked there. It's going to be www.voterchoicearizona.org. You can also get involved with us here at the Young Eco-Socialists of Arizona. If you are between the ages of 18 and 35, you can sign up to join the AZGP Youth Caucus and help us build the Arizona Green Party into the strong electoral vehicle for people, planet, and peace that the working class in Arizona deserves. And you can do that at www.yesgpaz.org/join-yes-az. And of course, you can join your local or state Green Party. You can sign up to volunteer on one of our state or county party working committees and get directly involved in the grassroots process of independent party building, growth, and maintenance. And you can do that at www.azgp.org/volunteer. And of course, we want to organize our communities. We don't have to wait for the slow bureaucracy of electoral politics, okay? That's what Democrats and Republicans do. You know, we're activists. We don't have to wait. Electoral politics, you know, every 2 years, every 4 years, it's great to spread the message and it's great to, you know, strive to get our candidates out there, but really the positive change starts in our communities, and we don't have to wait for the next election to do that. So you should, if you're wanting to get involved and organize your communities, the best advice I can give you, and I think will be echoed by a lot of people in this caucus, is that you got to start small and start local. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your neighbors, coworkers, anybody who will listen to you. Talk to them about the change that you want to see, because maybe they want to see it too. You can set up a community garden, start a public pantry or a fridge. You can organize community cleanups, starting a book drive for the local kids. Possibilities for change are endless. If there is a need that needs to be met that is not being met by our current government, we can meet it as the people. And of course, you want to connect with others. There are likely other activists or organizations already doing this kind of work in your community. Try and do some research first and see how you can connect, help your community, help these other orgs and activists, and, you know, just show solidarity with each other. It can be really overwhelming to try and start something new on your own. So, you know, plug into what's already going on and be that voice that wants to see that specific change. And usually you'll find that people will help you out if you help them out. And, you know, the best proof that we can provide to skeptics that our vision of change can work in the electoral realm is to do it outside of electoral politics. We need to be taking our electoral organizing just as seriously as the organizing we're doing in our communities on the ground through mutual aid and direct action. And of course, we do hope that you will all support independent candidates and campaigns. Uh, as most of us probably know, grassroots green and independent campaigns are powered by the people, not big corporations, and we need your help more than ever to defeat the corporate duopoly. And if you have money to throw at us, donating your money is great. But donating your time and energy as a volunteer and an active member of the party or of a campaign is the best. Every hour of volunteer time is worth more to a small organization or an independent candidate than most monetary donations. If we have people phone banking, if we have people canvassing, that can make up for a lot of money that the corporate duopoly can throw at their candidates. Nothing really beats the door-to-door, face-to-face connections that we can have with people if we really scale down and engage with our community. So volunteering is always a really great way to help out your particular supported independent candidate or campaign. And of course, bring a friend, encourage others to support these organizations and candidates with their time, energy, vote, money, whatever you got. If you want to see these changes happen and there is an independent candidate or a campaign that is fighting for that, we need your help. We only win when we stand together, and that is more true now than ever. And obviously, spread the word. Sharing a candidate or organization's posts or content on social media or telling a friend why you support them is the best way to get our message out to the people of AZ. We don't have connections with the big media companies. Fox is probably not going to have us on to talk about the Green Party here in Arizona, but through face-to-face connections and word of mouth and telling your friends why you support the Green Party, why you support eco-socialism, those are the sort of things that get people involved. And of course, you can run for something. That's always an option. The presence of strong independent candidates with deep roots in their communities running issues-based campaigns in local, state, and federal elections sends a clear message that what the duopoly is offering us in policy isn't what the grassroots of Arizona wants or needs. We're seeing that a lot with our current, GOP-controlled state legislatures. There's a lot of horrible legislation coming through that is not indicative of what the people want. Grassroots green campaigns are a fantastic way to spread the message of eco-socialism and the global green movement to our local communities, and if elected, demonstrate the value of green and eco-socialist leadership in government. And at the local level, Greens can even win. It's true. We have, I believe, over 100 office holders nationwide right now. And yeah, this myth that Greens can't win campaigns is not supported by evidence locally. Contested elections where a Green candidate is able to draw enough votes from a corporatist Democrat can cause the Democratic candidate to have to make policy concessions to the left rather than lose to the GOP candidate. So even if we don't win, we move the entire conversation, the whole Overton window, to the left by simply being a part of that election. And most importantly, don't give up, get organized.